On the day that I returned from Guantanamo Bay, the very day, I didn't know that when I would be returning, I would be taken to Paddington Green Police Station. And I was afraid that perhaps this may be the beginning of another section of incarceration. And the first friendly face that I met inside the police station, indeed after 3 years, was somebody I'm sure you've all heard of, Gareth Pierce, the human rights lawyer who became famous for the case of Birmingham 6 and Guildford 4. But one of the things she told me was bizarre, completely bizarre. She welcomed me back to what she said would be freedom, but said that I can't be here with you for the next session in which the police want to talk to you, because I have to go off for an historic hearing in this country, and that is the House of Lords are going to be passing a decision on the detainment of men in this country, not in Guantanamo or Babaran or whatever, but in the United Kingdom of Great Britain, who have been held for 3 years without charge, without trial, under anti-terror legislation. And of course, the next day, they did rule that the detainment of these men was in fact unconstitutional. However, these men were not directly released, but they were released under a regime that exists to this day under the time of the control rules.
And what we, as what ordinary people on the street would see as inhuman and degrading, has actually become institutionalized over the years in our prisons. Violence between prisoners, violence against prisoners, the use of prisoners as a form of control, the use of prisoners against each other by staff to maintain and manage control, to almost everybody in this room. These are the issues that are crucial to an understanding of the relationship between prison and violence. Violent protest, the actual use of protest within prisons as forms of resistance, but also passive resistance. When does self-harming, when does turning in on oneself in a violent way reflect a form of violence that is inflicted on the individual within the prison itself? People who are already on the outside of prison damaged in so many different ways. And of course, the very act of self-harm or taking of one's own life, those issues are violent acts. They're not acts that I have ever known anybody enter into lightly. We only have to read the testimonies of those who die, the testimonies that they leave behind, to see that.
Inquests into deaths repeat the same issues time and time again about the appalling conditions, systemic neglect of women's physical and mental health. Prison obviously exacerbating and often creating those problems. Failure to implement suicide prevention guidelines, lack of staff training. And I think it's clear from our monitoring and analysis that understanding why these deaths occur requires an examination of wider, broader social and political context. Because obviously these deaths are part of a pattern which impact on policies on drug and alcohol use, homelessness, mental health, crime prevention, poverty, penal policy and policing. And Phil mentioned the death of Pauline Campbell. And I think it's important that to recognise the impact on families that the deaths and the investigations have, and I very much hope that by shining a spotlight on what happens through families' involvement in the inquest process, we actually raise awareness about the conditions that vulnerable people are being kept in.
I'm trying to pick up today on some of the questions that were raised yesterday by David and by Joe about how can we take, I think the way it was phrased was how can we take the public with us? And so I'd like to reframe that as what would it take to create the massive change in public consciousness that would be needed to really abolish prisons? And I'm going to suggest in my talk and also through the work that I've been doing in the last 10 years that what we need, of course, is to build a mass movement along the lines of the civil rights movement and, of course, the original movement to abolish slavery as well as the movement in the States to abolish lynching.
On the second day of the ICOPA conference at King's College London, speakers addressed prison and the politics of poverty, where Professor Julia Sudbury of Mills College, California, and co-founder of Critical Resistance said, "Penal abolition is becoming a mass movement along the lines of the anti-slavery and anti-death penalty movement."
the definition of penal policy, okay, the definition of which acts should be criminalised and the description and discussion of methods for combating crime. That's penal policy. And I found 23 different definitions of capitalism, and I'm sure you'll have your own. And I found 3 different definitions also of privatisation. Great, I can find them. Right, okay. Privatisation means endorsing, assigning the ownership of a public property, business or function to a private party. Privatisation, this is a great one, means selling off assets paid for with the money of ordinary people through taxes so that rich people can make huge profits and sack all the workers.
That's the one.
That was brilliant. Okay, I'm sure you have your own. Capitalism, okay, one of my favourite ones. Capitalism is a business simulation computer game. There you go. For those of you who didn't know. And some of the others, an economic and social system in which individuals can maximise profits because they own the means of production. Another one, economic system in which property is privately owned and goods are privately produced. It is sometimes referred to as the private enterprise system. So that's one of the 23 definitions of capitalism that I found just doing a Google search.
I'd like just to link into the comments made previously by Stephen to say that the extension of the prison industrial complex, in fact, is an expression of capitalism. It's massively expanded. There are many people who hang off the body of that beast, and we're not talking only about prison officers. We're talking about service providers and people who often present themselves as actually offering the best services to prisoners and looking with the best will of prisoners. But speaking as an ex-prisoner, I never sensed that goodwill. I'm sorry, I never did. No one ever asked me in my 10 years, why are you in here, Beth? How can we look after you? Can we help you with education? Are you okay? How's your wife? It didn't happen. And every ex-prisoner knows, I'm sure it's the same. Jason, is it the same? Same in the UK? Thank you. Everybody knows. There's no goodwill being expressed in jails. There's no sense of corrections. Nothing there at all. And so to have goodwill coming out of the community, like ICOPA and Critical Resistance and all those organisations, we need you. We need you bad, speaking as an ex-prisoner.
On the third day, the ICOPA conference continued with the focus on the role of privatisation and capitalism in penal policy. Stephen Nathan of Prison Privatisation Report International said, "There is no evaluation of or public accountability in the process, with those in charge adopting the typical business practice or expansion and corporate growth."